Hey guys, last year Fractal released Torrent case, which very quickly became king of airflow cases. Then they went through and they made a smaller version for those who are looking for more compact cases, which was a Fractal Torrent Compact and Nano. We actually built a water cooling build in a Nano case, so if you want to check it out, we'll leave a link in the description below. Fast forward to today, they're releasing 4 new cases, and they're releasing them based on their existing lineups, the Define 7 and Meshify 2. So we have Meshify 2 Nano and Mini right here. And they're also releasing the same for Define 7 series. The case is actually very similar. Define 7 is using a solid front panel, while Meshify is using, well, mesh on the front. I prefer this for better airflow and actually aesthetics as well. Let's get into it, and we're going to compare these two particular cases and see if you should go for the smaller case, depending on what your use case is, or maybe you should opt for a larger one. Let's open them up and see what we get for your money. By the way, both of these cases come in a dark tint or a light tint tempered glass, no solid panels. If you want to get a solid case from front and side completely covered, you have to go with the Define 7. Just thought you should know. You can immediately see the difference in sizes. The Nano can only fit up to an ITX size motherboard, while the Mini can actually fit in micro ATX. So you'll have a lot more compatibility in this particular case, and micro ATX boards are actually just so much cheaper because there's just so many more of them out there. And realistically, you should be able to get a bit more cooling, but we'll get into that a bit later on. The other notable difference is the fan compatibility. In the smaller case, you can only fit 5 maximum fans, which will be at 120mm in size, or you can fit in 3 140 and 1 120. On the other hand, in the larger case, you can fit in up to 7 120mm fans, or you can go 4 140 and 1 120. The 120s, by the way, are the ones on the exhaust, and they actually come with it on both sides. And both cases have 1 140mm fan at the front already pre-installed. So you get 2 fans per case, which is quite nice to start with. So it will be an easy expansion from there. The next thing is drive compatibility. Smaller case obviously has a lot less space for the drives. So let's just open them up at the back. So we've got the accessories, and let's see on this one. So we've got the Meshify Mini and Meshify Nano. Now I can remember which one is which. The Nano can only support up to 2 3.5-inch drives or up to 4 2.5-inch drives with 3 included mounts. On the other hand, the Mini can support up to 2 3.5-inch drives and still 4 dedicated 2.5-inch drives with 2 included mounts right here. While we still look at this from the back, as you can see here, there's enough space for a full-size ATX power supply. It is especially nice in the more compact builds, as they normally push you to start using SFX power supplies. And those have issues, especially with the more modern graphics cards on those transient spikes. So bigger power supply, providing it's of a good quality, is normally a little bit better. But it also depends what components you put inside. Let's flip it over and see other few differences before we get into the similarities. Due to the size and mostly due to the height of the case, we can only have one expansion, so you'd normally put in a graphics card in a case like this. On the other hand, here you have a few extra expansions, so you could technically put in a 3-slot graphics card and then slot in a sound card or a network card at the bottom. Or maybe go for a thinner graphics card and have other expansions at the same time. So it's a bit more flexible to go with a larger case. Next, we can talk about similarities of the cases. For this, I'm going to flip it over and we can see the top I/O, which makes it a bit easier to see. You'll see from the top, they're actually identical. So what we've got on the front is the power button on both, the audio, microphone, USB Type-C, which is in 10 gigabit speed, and also a pair of USB 3s in Type A configuration. As you can see from the shot, the width of devices is exactly the same. So really it's just the height. Now we can talk about one thing that I'm actually pretty frustrated about. Fractal got a lot of flack for Meshify 2 when they released it with the front filter. It opens up and you can get it for servicing, but the filter doesn't actually come out. It knocks into this top panel. So it's just major inconvenience. And this front part doesn't come off. So the top panel actually does come off with a bit of force. You can lift it off for easy accessibility for the filter up top. But this is still stuck in there. So what you have to do is lower this, actually pull this off the hinges, then take it off for cleaning. To be fair, you might want to actually remove this inner filter anyway, because it is restricting airflow, but you will need to clean your PC more often. But that's a choice you have to make yourself. Personally, I wish they sorted this issue in a design and just made it more convenient for the end user. Mainly because I am not a big fan of slotting in these plastic front plates in, because at some point this plastic will give way and or you're going to make a mistake and it's going to break. Because we have exactly the same problem on this side. Exactly the same. Since we mentioned the top panel, let me show you a neat little trick that is actually very useful when building a PC in these cases. Top plate is off. We'll put it to the side and just put it over here. Right. You can take off the filter. After removing a few side screws, you can actually remove the top plate for easier access into the machine. So removing this has two major benefits. First of all, you have a lot more space now to work inside the machine when you're building inside of it. Secondly, if you're using a liquid all-in-one cooler, you can actually deal with the radiator and the fans and screw it all together and start hiding all the cables towards the back, and then just take the whole cooler, slot it in, and install it in place. It's just a much easier way of setting it up. So it's a nice little feature. I wish it was less screws, but you need some screws to hold it all together, so it's a lot more rigid. Together with the top and the front filter, we also have one at the bottom, and you can easily access it from just pulling it out here, which is very nice for easy maintenance. Let's now look inside the cases, and one of the first things that really stood out to me when looking into the Nano case is this little groove which pushes the air up into the middle of the case, which is a pretty cool little feature. If you want to install a radiator or anything else, you can just remove these plastic inserts and work on installing the radiator at the front. The other thing that both these cases have is a nice bit of punch outs for the cables. So you have ones just here, so you can plug in your graphics card straight down and across, and also the ones across the top. So you have a little insert at the top left and a bottom left, and also enough space to route all your cabling in around the motherboard. Same goes for the mini case. And in fact, you have more punch outs at the top here. So at least you have coverage all around. And just like in the Nano, you can take out the bottom plates to install bigger radiators for better compatibility, should you wish so. To finish the initial overview of these cases, let's have a look at the cable management that is provided. Both these cases have plenty of velcros to really tuck those cables away. By the way, since both these cases don't come with RGB, you're not going to have that many cables in here unless you go and buy all different fans and all the airway accessories. But even if you do, there's still plenty of space to tuck things away. With the overview done, let's now set up our test bench inside and see how it performs, and actually be able to give you some insight in if it's easy to build in them and how do they perform. After setting up the system in both of these cases, I do have some comments. The smaller Meshify 2 Nano is pretty easy to build in, especially since you can take out the top panel for extra reach. Same applies for the Mini. Just keep in mind, it has limited amount of space at the back, so if you plan to install multiple SSDs as well as 3.5-inch drive, you will have to spend some time cable managing it to make everything fit. If you install liquid AAO on the front, then it'll be even more challenging. At the same time, I'm really happy that Fractal provides so many velcros. I do wish there was one more towards the bottom to route the cables towards the power supply area. With the stock configuration, the front fan has nice direct airflow to the GPU. We'll cover this in more detail a bit later on. While the back of the case is pretty crammed, the front has decent amount of space even when using an air cooler. There's plenty of clearance for almost any air cooler out there, and to be honest, I'd probably recommend sticking with air in this case. Just add extra few fans and you'll be good to go. As for Meshify 2 Mini, it is essentially the same but with less limitations. There is considerably more space at the back for cable management, as well as extra 3.5-inch drive cage. The access to the bottom punch out is tight but possible with a little bit of wiggling. On the front side, I like the middle standoff that holds the motherboard in place while the case is standing upwards. Since this case is bigger, you can fit thicker graphics card, and if needed you can even install some fans above the cooler or opt for slim radiator setup. After checking out this case further, if you want to set up a bit of a Franken storage system, then with some additional brackets you can actually install up to 9 2.5-inch drives together with 2 3.5-inch drives, or 7 2.5-inch drives with 4 3.5-inch drives. It would not exactly be ideal, as you'd be using up a bunch of potential fan locations, but it is possible. If you need that much storage, then I would really recommend looking at getting a separate NAS instead. The one bit of criticism I have is the lack of cable routing options at the bottom of the motherboard. I would have liked some small cutouts for routing RGB, audio and front header cables on the large motherboards. Right now you have to do it from the side or the middle cutout, which is made for graphics card cable, which is not ideal. Other than that, the cases are very similar. That is by design. Let's now cover performance. Also, if you'd like to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. We're now launching our new test bench in a controlled environment and we'll be keeping track of results moving forward, so bear with us while we grow our database. For benchmarking, we're running Intel i7 8700K overclocked to 3.9 GHz at 1.1 volts, which is pulling approximately 115 watts continuous. GPU wise, we're using AMD Radeon 6700 XT at stock settings with fans set to 55%, which is pulling 185 watts continuous and is running at 33.5 dBA. For getting the most consistent results, we're running Prime 95 and Firmark for 25 minutes, which we found is enough time to reach maximum temperatures. Let's start with the first test where we set all the fans to 100% to demonstrate maximum performance with this setup. Here on the CPU side, both cases deliver very similar results, hovering around 81 to 82 degrees, which is uneventful. When we look at the results on the GPU side, we see Meshify 2 Nano running 3 degrees cooler than the Mini on both GPU temperatures as well as GPU hotspot temperature. This is likely due to the channel from the front fan feeding GPU with the fresh air. By the way, take note that even though Nano is smaller case, it is actually 1 decibel quieter than the Mini. Next we normalize the fans to 35 dBA and run the same tests, where we see both GPU and CPU obviously warmer, but still very similar range. Just 1 degree difference between Nano and Mini, and 2 degrees difference on the GPU side. Nano is still the better case here, but only by a small margin, which brings us really well to the conclusion. I feel both of these cases look good while maintaining a pretty standard form factor. The build quality is great as always with cases from Fractal, but I wish they made a few extra holes at the bottom to route those cables. As far as performance goes, we currently only have these systems, so it's hard to compare. But just looking at the temperatures and the noise levels, these cases have reasonable airflow without sounding like a jet engine taking off. And with the pricing between $100 and $110, I'm not sure if Fractal priced it well considering they just released Fractal Pop, which is a cheaper alternative. But let me know what you guys think. If you want to check out any of the items covered in the video today, the links are in the description below. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up and subscribe for more. We'll see you guys in the next one.